Hello and welcome to our official book club for Isis, Mother of Magic, modern goddesses who embody her eternal grace and power. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Annabelle Hart. I am an international best-selling author, medicine woman, and teacher, offering embodied Shakti leadership facilitator training for women. And I am one of the authors who contributed a chapter to this beautiful book, Isis, Mother of Magic. And I thank you for your patience with me. My body has been moving through quite a big clearing recently, and I'm finally feeling with a little bit more vitality and energy to come and share this experience with you all today. I do have my water with me in case I need to sip that throughout. So thank you for bearing with me. And yeah, the way I like to approach these experiences of reading my chapter to you is that maybe at times I'm reading word for word, but at other times I'm just going to allow what feels to come through me to be shared, which is a beautiful way to have this experience with one another, because you're receiving my chapter through my spoken words, but also maybe even a more expansive version of this chapter. And I have the beautiful paperback edition of Isis, Mother of Magic with me. So if you have your copy with you, you're welcome to read it along as we flow. Or even the Kindle edition would be more than fine too. And otherwise, you're welcome to just sit back, relax, lie down, and allow yourself to really receive the presence of this moment with one another. So before we go into this experience, let's just allow the day that has been or the day that's yet to come just simply to wash away for a moment so that we can really immerse in this space together. So I'm going to invite you, if you are in a safe space, to be able to close your eyes. You can close your eyes. And just start to connect your awareness into your breath, allowing your inhale to expand from the base of your belly, through your lungs and up to your heart. And exhale. Feel welcome to sigh or sound the breath away. And just focusing your awareness into the center of your heart space. Just seeing if there's any colors or visuals that feel to come through to you in this now moment, or maybe a different kind of experience that you're noticing internally. I'm noticing this really soft rose light, kind of like a rose quartz crystal with these golden sparkles and threads weaving in amongst that light. And I'm just feeling this energy swirling in my heart chakra and sharing this space with you. And incredible gratitude to be here with every single one of you. So thank you for tuning in. And let's begin. Resurrection of the Ancient Feminine Arts by Annabelle Hart. Dreaming of death. I've had many nightmares in both dream and waking states. One nightmare I recall from my childhood rattled me to my core, and I never dared to share it with anyone. Even at that age, I had an inner knowing of how powerful words are and that they cast spells. And given how much this one shook me, I felt unsure of naming this nightmare in case it actually came through. At the age of 14, I realized it was much more like a prophetic dream that I had experienced earlier in life. It seems at a higher and deeper level, I was being prepared for what was to come. And yet, nothing and no one can ever fully prepare you for such an initiation. I remember feeling quite bubbly, brushing my teeth and getting ready for the school day ahead, when I heard my name being called over the loudspeaker in the boarding house. I was being instructed to come to reception. Given that I was only a couple of weeks into this new boarding school and still finding my way, I asked the other girls if it was normal to be called to reception at this time of the morning. I wondered what it would be about. The girls noted it was a little unusual and seemed curious too. Still with my toothbrush in hand, I walked downstairs, anxious and intrigued to see what it was all about. I saw my eldest brother standing with my mum and dad. My initial thought and inner dialogue was, yes, they've come to collect me, take me out of school, and we're all going to see my other brother, Andrew, in hospital. I bet he'll love that. This insight was mostly accurate, though with a slight twist. No one said a word, and their faces stared lifelessly at me. Not a single smile, and their eyes were stone cold. It was at that moment that I knew Andrew was dead. I burst into the most horrific howls, collapsing in a heap on the hard floor beneath. The wailing of grief that flooded my being was so crippling that they had to pick me up off the floor, take me into another room, close the doors, and try to console me before going to the hospital to see the lifeless body he once inhabited. After the whole ordeal, many weeks or months later, the girls at school told me they'd never heard anything so horrendous before, other than the ferocious screams coming from the depths of my grieving heart. It was only moments earlier that I had awoken in my bed at boarding school and strangely felt an inner calling to pray for Andrew's well-being, that he may be protected and recover fully from this surgery he'd had only days prior. I grew up in an Anglican family, was christened as a baby, and attended boarding schools from the age of 10, all of which had rather strong religious ideologies. But I myself did not relate with religion as such. And so to find myself actually desiring and feeling the extraordinary impulse to pray for my brother felt so surreal. Yet I listened, honored, and acted in accordance with this inner knowing or calling. Even though it was uncomfortable for me to lean into this, especially at that stage of my life, I knew it was necessary and practiced trusting that my prayers would be heard. 2 days prior to the morning Andrew passed, Mum had texted to say that he was continuously asking after me and wondered if I'd come to see him in hospital. Given that Andrew was with disabilities, he was born with these, he was in and out of doctors and specialist appointments, hospitalized for varied surgeries and procedures from the moment he was born to the moment he died in the very same hospital 18 years later. He had never asked me to visit him before. So I felt intrigued by that. Initially, I considered not going because I had touch football training and school homework to tend to. And given that I was at a new school and I'd nearly been expelled from the other 3 schools prior to this one, I was trying to be a more focused student, but she said he'd seemed rather persistent, so I said yes. My auntie and 2 cousins picked me up from boarding school and took me to the hospital. It was awful. Andrew wasn't breathing and was hooked up to a machine that was supposedly breathing for him, but even that didn't seem to be working. His skin was the foulest yellow and purple color from the copious amounts of morphine that was being pumped into his body, and he was cold, lifeless. Even being as young as I was then, I sensed that his spirit wasn't actually in his body. I kept saying to Mum, something is wrong. He's not breathing. My words seemingly fell on deaf ears. Maybe Mum didn't fully hear me or feel the urgency with my words. Maybe she didn't want to because it might have confirmed her own concerns. Maybe she didn't know how to stand in her power and stand her ground to name hers and Andrew's needs with the nurses and doctors. Maybe they did come to tend to him, but dismiss any alarms. Any which way, apparently, it was his time. This was not my first initiation with death. There were many people, animals, plants close to me who departed prior to my brother's passing. But he certainly was the most significant. Less than 3 weeks later, my grandfather passed also. And then for the next 9 years later, my grandmother endured grueling treatment in an aged home without our complete conscious awareness of this before she finally passed also. The departure of these three in particular have certainly been the most impactful and influential in my heart and soul's awakening. Multi-dimensional revelations and resurrections. During this time of my life, I hadn't yet accessed the wealth of wisdom from within that I now have available regarding how to relate wholly with death and grief, be it physically or even metaphorically, like shedding one's skin or an old identity. Initially, I was doing what felt natural and true for me, which was to flow freely in the flood of grief for my brother and grandfather's passing. However, one evening, a dear friend at that time said in a rather criticizing tone, "Don't you think you've cried enough already? Nobody wants to be around someone who is sad all the time." I'm sure in some layer and level, she meant well by this comment, but how I perceived and received it at the time was how I was feeling wasn't welcome. And to have friends, I needed to stop grieving. So I swallowed it whole. Fuck. What a mess that eventuated thereafter, and for many years beyond then too. Turns out, trying to suppress and silence an inner tsunami of grief can lead one to an explosive eruption of inner and outer destruction. You can read more on this in my second international bestseller, Sovereign Liberated Women Who Boldly Claim Their Power. But as a brief overview, addictive behaviors with smoking, drinking, drugs, and sex peaked at an all-time high during those years of my life, most especially. I hurt myself and many others around me. The unexpected beauty in all of this was that after I finished school, I found myself on a voyage of self-discovery, beginning with my moving to England at the age of 17. Miraculously, amidst still navigating some inner and outer chaos, I found yoga while traveling in Switzerland. This was the initiation of my homecoming. For many years, I traveled and lived abroad while simultaneously exploring certified training in various medicines and modalities including yoga, specializing in therapeutic practices and children's yoga, aromatherapy, Bach flower remedies, emotional freedom technique, ceremonial cacao, Andean shamanism through the sacred feminine medicine wheel, dragon Shakti breathwork, crystal singing bowls, and so much more. All of these have been a potent piece of the puzzle for my soul and destiny retrievals. Each have unveiled and unraveled layers of hidden traumas, especially with regards to sexual abuse from a very early age in life. Through exploring these tools and techniques at various stages and phases of my journey, I have been supported to connect the dots, so to speak, especially with relation to why I had such a strong habit of being extremely dissociated to the point of amnesia, why I was severely depressed from such a young age, and why I was seemingly trapped in addictive and abusive behaviors for many decades. Much like Mother Jaguar, I have been able to track these traumas to the source, receive the hidden treasures available for me, and understand or have an inner standing of all that they were here to teach me. You can read more on all of this in my first international bestseller, Magdalene Rising, Feminine Leaders Guided by Her Fierce and Unconditional Wisdom, and third international bestseller, Jaguar Medicine, Fierce Feminine Frequency Keepers, Birthing the New Earth. Over the past decade of journeying with the aforementioned, as well as plant medicine ceremonies and more, all of these have led me to some very powerful revelations and resurrections, multi-dimensionally and multi-generationally. Each in their own way has guided me home through this remembrance of other lifetimes and timelines, where my soul was or is practicing the ancient feminine arts through several cultures and traditions. One of which was the ancient arts of death rituals, ceremonies, and various rites of passage. This is still a personal and professional passion of mine. Some of you reading this may find it strange to have a passion with reverence to death. For me, though, it honestly feels so natural. I was born on All Hallows Eve, Halloween, and have always had a fascination with all things mysterious. I have always been able to perceive and receive the spirit world through my highly sensitive sensory perceptions. And these days, I can support spirits that cross over and offer people and their spaces clearings when necessary. My astrological natal chart has strong placements with Scorpio, a sign well known for its gifts with dancing in death and rebirth. And the scorpion is a sacred animal strongly affiliated with goddess Isis. As a kid, I was fascinated by ancient Egypt, and in particular, the death rituals, ceremonies, and rites of passage, which goddess Isis tended to after the passing of her husband, Osiris. So you see, it's always been innate within this life and many others too. Earlier, I was sharing about the death and grief sometimes being something that we experience physically, like a person, animal, or plant dying. Yes, I have immensely grieved for the death of trees too. Several times I've found myself curled in the fetal position, grieving for trees that were cut down nearby. Some may call this overly sensitive. Others simply know this is how it is to be connected with the web of all life. And other times, death and grief can be more of a metaphorical experience. For instance, through my own journey with depression, I have come to an inner knowing that the density and intensity of such suffocating sensations is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And it's not there to seemingly entice one to commit suicide. I see it more as an invitation to be much like a serpent, another sacred animal of goddess Isis, and shed one's skin, metaphorically speaking. I see it as an invitation to let go of old beliefs, thoughts, stories, and identities that one may have felt caged in and become crippled by, which are no longer nourishing or necessary. Oftentimes, it's not even the individual stuff that they're carrying, but ideologies that have been programmed into the psyche, passed down from generation to generation, lifetime after lifetime. Hence, I am very passionate about supporting and guiding others to see, feel, and know and relate with death, grief, and depression from a more enriching, empowering, and expansive space. I do so through many of the medicines and modalities that I weave with. One of the most profound being the ancient Egyptian womb grief release ritual, which is also interwoven through my Embodied Shakti leadership facilitator training for women. I was initiated with these rites of passages and many more through my 2-year journey around the sacred feminine medicine wheel with Samantha J. And it is such an honor to now guide others into these transformative terrains. Menstrual magic, guiding goddesses to birth the golden age. It is through this 2-year initiation in particular that I have returned home to self through the remembrance of the ancient feminine arts, especially with regards to menstrual magic. Goddess Isis of ancient Egypt is mother of magic. She is queen of the ancient feminine arts, especially death rituals, ceremonies, and various rites of passage. Isis offers gracious healing and rebirth and represents the divine mother of unconditional love and fertility. During such sacred times when the ancient feminine arts were revered, Kundalini awakenings were activated to arise and anchor simultaneously in both men and women. The divine feminine was received rather than rejected, and unity consciousness and sacred sexuality prayers and practices were sanctified through the healing heart field of men and women. It was during such times too that women and all seasons of their menstrual, motherhood, and menopause phases of womanhood were deeply and divinely revered with grace and gratitude. When women remember to give their womb blood back to the earth, men will come home from war and earth shall find peace. And this is an ancient Hopi prophecy. Allow the above prophetic words to truly sink into your whole self and every single cell. Can you feel the resonance of this in your being, body, blood, and bones as you breathe fully and deeply with this? This hums in my heart, swirls tears in my eyes, and streams tingles through my whole body. Tingles and tears somatically represent truth for me. Can you notice too how prevalent such a prophecy is for our collective humankind, now most especially, as parts of our inner and outer worlds navigate conflict and war? Can you imagine the world we'd be living in if women and all were in deep resonance and reverence with Mother Nature and with women's innate seasons and cycles? Can you feel how much more peace and presence exudes from within and for all when we allow ourselves to be a living embodied prayer and devotional act of grace with every breath and step upon this earth? Long ago, we humans lived in harmony with Mother Nature. Andean shamans refer to this as living in Aini. This is the word for right relationship within and with all. We honored Pachamama as being a part of us and we a part of her. We were in divine synchronicity with her natural seasons and cycles. And as women especially, we also lived in harmony with our inner seasons and cycles. We revered all phases of our journey as women, being menstruation, motherhood, and menopause, or the maiden, the mother, and the crone, or wise woman. Others in our tribes and communities, like men and children, also honored the sacred seasons of Sophia Gaia, Mother Earth, and of women, especially with reverence to our monthly menstrual cycle, or moon flow, as I often refer to it. The first shamans were female, and long ago, when a maiden received her first bleed of her menstrual cycle, she would be initiated through various rites of passage. She would be guided through a vision quest to connect with her spirit name, spirit guardians and guides, and her spirit animals. Through soul and destiny retrievals, she would unlock her remembrance of her life purpose and know the way for her soul's evolution in this life and beyond. She knew what she was here to dream into being from within and in honor of all. Menstruation was known as the original shamanic journey. And as such, young women through all phases of womanhood were deeply and divinely anchored in themselves with Sophia Gaia and the cosmos. Knowing themselves as a child of the universe, they had such a serene and strong sense of inner security that is unfortunately rarely seen in today's society. For many generations now, society has forgotten the way of honoring these significant rites of passage for maidens transitioning into motherhood, and likewise vital rites of passages for boys journeying into manhood have also been forgotten. This has created such substantial dis-ease, energetically at a soul level, psychologically, with mental illness being at an all-time high, emotional and hormonal disturbance, and physical dis-ease also within both women and men. The ripple effect of forgetting such ancient wisdom has been so disparaging and destructive. For too long, society has been conditioned to believe that a woman's menstrual blood is dirty, something that should not be spoken of or ever seen by another, and that one should be ashamed of having such a disgusting experience each month, and even of being a woman. These ideologies, prominent in many cultures around the world, are hideously inhumane. This creates a striking segregation and separation, not only within society, but at a soul level too. We become disconnected, dissociated, and dishonoring of ourselves as women, but also with Mother Nature. We forget that we are intimately interwoven through this intricate web which weaves all life as being sacred. Fortunately, these days are done, and the wisdom of the ancient feminine arts is being resurrected now. Maidens and women are being called forth to remember the primal power of our womb blood, to graciously, with gratitude and gentleness, discard the programmed patriarchal with each cycle of our moon flow, to reconnect with receiving reverently the wild feminine from within and of all, to open ourselves to honor, love, and celebrate our menstrual blood and the magical and medicinal healing powers of the life-saving stem cells that are shed each month. If collected, these can regrow a heart, a brain, or other tissues that become damaged. Menstrual blood can also reverse the effects of aging. The pure presence we can consciously create with honoring our womb wisdom, the more pure and powerful the medicinal and healing benefits of our menstrual blood can be, not just for ourselves, but for all. During such times of the ancient feminine arts, menstruation was revered as sacred, not just by the women, but by all the tribe's people. This prevailing phase of a woman's cycle invited her to meet and honor the primordial power of her inner womb wisdom, menstrual blood, and to connect more intimately with lunar consciousness. Women would gather in circle and ceremony together, nourishing their needs through embodied prayers, dancing, singing, adorning and anointing with holy oils and even womb blood, as they honored the sacred Shakti energy within and of all. This time was revered for deep rest and rejuvenation, where women were welcome as the wild feminine and free to bleed with the earth, gifting their magical and medicinal womb blood back to Gaia. Through womb blood anointing, women created a menstrual Merkaba or womb field, which awoke the primal part of the brain and altered states of consciousness. With the right hemisphere of the brain being more easily accessible, this meant that intuition, creativity, and psychic gifts were heightened during this time. Women were revered as being the oracle, not only for their own life and that of their families, but for their communities and collective also. As often they received an inner knowing of what was to come and how to plan and act accordingly. As the ancient feminine arts are being resurrected and goddesses of her grace are birthing the golden age now, Isis, being the epitome of the divine feminine, which resides within all, calls us home to this inner union of the sacred feminine and masculine. She is the quintessence and pure peace, presence, power, sovereign grace, fiercely loving and courageous leadership from within and for all. She calls us to embody these qualities within ourselves and ourselves also. The time is now to remember the primordial power of how it is to be a woman and come home to honoring the womb consciousness of Sophia Gaia, yourself and the cosmos, to harmonize with the sacred seasons of Pachamama and within your womb, to embody yourself as the gorgeous and glowing goddess through all seasons of your menstrual, motherhood, and menopause phases of womanhood, to be an embodied Shakti leader of your life and trust the innate oracular wisdom to graciously guide you and all through this collective homecoming. And there we have it. My chapter for Isis, Mother of Magic, modern goddesses who embody her eternal grace and power. That, of all the chapters in the various multi-author books that I've contributed to, is the one that I've probably most directly read to you. So I hope that was of value to hear it spoken through the author's words. And I would love to hear from you if you feel to reach out and connect, to share any reflections or revelations that have come through for you. And of course, if you are a woman who's interested in learning more about embodied Shakti leadership facilitator training, and if this is a fit for you, then please feel welcome to reach out and I will happily share more with you. Thank you again for sharing this space together today and sending you bountiful blessings on your way. Namaste.